and then come back to the board, and the board would determine what direction to go once we get actual prices. These are estimates. You know, in some cases, we may do a little bit better. In some cases, it may cost a little bit more. But we won't know until we go to the bid process to get those exact dollars, come back to the board and say, okay, to do these 3 sections of Central, it would be X amount. To do these 3 sections of East, it would be Y. And then kind of start to put the plan together. But this gives us a pretty good map in terms of what areas we want to begin to get bids on in the spring.
Rich, on the roofs, what's the life expectancy of the roofing that we're replacing? Is this a 10-year, 20-year, 40-year?
Typically, the roofs that we have between a 15 and 20-year warranty. These flat roofs, what the goal would be is to, prior to the roof starting to leak, at some point, after the warranty expires, we'll restore it and extend the life another 10 or 15 years. So these roofs could possibly last 30 to 35 years.
So unlike a conventional shingled house roof, there's maintenance or something that needs to be done with this after the roof has been installed?
Flat roofs require maintenance annually. A lot of that is inspection. We do in-house inspections, and we have a thorough inspection with the architect. Dr. King stated there's identified a few issues that we may be able to call warranties on. But yes, there's maintenance required. Flat roofs.
Is the warranty 100%, or is it like tires or batteries, like prorated?
It would be prorated. Certainly not going to be replace a 10-year-old roof and give you a 20-year warranty on it.
I just think that this was a, needed information because I think we have to build these capital projects into a budget. And I think it's imperative that we start, I think we're planning in December to start talking about some of these salary items that we have for next year and start working on next year's budget and having a 5-year budget out with all of these things. There's some things on here where I think roofing is obviously going to be more important, I think, than some of these asphalt projects. I just think we have to kind of, prioritize some of these things. But I think we have to start with how are we going to rebuild our operating fund balances and setting some sort of, either dollar amount or percentage of revenue that we're targeting and start building the budget from there. And I think we have to start, taking the theory that we heard earlier and start actually putting it into, dollars and cents so we can start working on that.
And I know I asked you this at the Building and Finance Committee meeting. None of this work that's talked about here there's nothing that needs to be done yesterday that's critical to the structure or buildings or anything else like that. These are all things that obviously need some attention that you're working at.
The roofs identified in here, top priority, 1 to 2 year range, would be appropriate to start addressing that next summer.
Anyone, is this parking lots too?
Yes.
Yes. It's just a quick question, and just so you know, I'm not asking to eliminate the program. God knows what it is. What is the life expectancy of a tennis court? It's a lot of money for a tennis court.
20 years.
20 years? And then is there annual or maintenance or something that we do during that 20 years?
Our courts have been resurfaced. We also did annual crack filling for approximately 8 to 10 years until the courts got to the point where the type of crack filling we were doing was no longer effective. It would last less than a year. I did actually meet with another contractor today on our courts, talk to him a little bit about the likelihood being slim that we could replace them as participating in several other options, and he's going to get back to me with a repair spec and overlay spec that could be an alternate to this.
And those tennis courts are 2004. 94.
And some of this work will also probably, perhaps, coincide with of life safety?
Very little on the pavement. If there are issues where there's a tripping hazard or a pothole that could result in a school bus trying to shoot from their seat, those are life safety violations and have to be addressed immediately. But life safety really doesn't cover general parking lot maintenance rules.
Thank you.
When are we expecting the life safety?
December 23rd, when we start the process.
Well, we should have it January, beginning of February. Typically, their turnaround is very quick. They'll bring 2 teams of engineers, 1 at each school.
Any other questions? Thank you. Mr. Wilkie. Action items. Have a motion for the outstanding invoices, please.
Motion to approve the outstanding invoices in the amount of $1,937,319.28 dated November 17th, 2016.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Discussion? Have a discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Lucetti?
Aye.
Mrs. Glatz?
Aye.
Mr. Kosel?
Aye.
Mr. Kirky?
Aye.
Mr. Costick?
Aye.
Mr. Lulo?
Aye.
Mrs. Molinar?
Aye. Approval of the intergovernmental agreement with the Will County Consortium for Contracting Transportation Employee Testing Services. Have a motion, please. Second?
Second.
Discussion?
Mr. Leone will give us a brief overview, and if you have any questions,
Good evening. I'm here to talk a little bit about our drug testing. Obviously, in 1991, federal legislation was passed requiring CDL drivers to go through a regimen of drug testing, and a consortium was formed as a means as a cost saving and control expenses. Because the federal legislation is very specific in how this drug testing regimen should take place. The consortium is made up of 15 school districts in Will County, and we work together to try to get the best price for the specific things that are done.
Any questions for Mr. Leone?
How long have we been a part of this consortium?
I believe it started originally the first one came about in 1994. So it's been quite a while. The legislation was passed in 1991 and implemented thereafter. It's been a while.
the price per test has gone up $2 in the last several years.
Yes, not much. I checked today, we pay $19 per test to Riverside Health, and that's where the medical review officer is, the person who actually, we're paying that $19 to the doctor to verify the results. I spoke to David Gray from Juliet Township. He is my counterpart there, and they administer the sourcing for the group. And the previous contract was $18, so it's been fairly stable for quite some time. It just went to $19 as a result of the last renewal 2 years ago.
Mike, how many randoms do we do per quarter?
The last batch just came in. It's generally between 25 or 35. I get an envelope from Riverside. They pick the drivers. And the letters are all printed out. I sign them. We call them. They have 2 hours to get it done.
Any qualitative issues you've ever had with the consortium process?
In the time I've been doing this, I'm not aware of any. No.
Thank you. Have a motion at the second. Have a roll call, please.
Mrs. Glatz?
Aye.
Mr. Kosel?
Aye.
Mr. Kirky?
Aye.
Mr. Costick?
Aye.
Mr. Lucetti?
Aye.
Mr. Lulo?
Aye.
Mrs. Molinar?
Aye. 2015-2016 audit report.
With the state of Meyer, partner for LWWatch, for annuities.
Thank you, Mr. Meyer.
Good evening. Thanks for having me out. Our firm had the pleasure of performing the annual audit of the district for the year ended June 30th, 2016. And I believe you have copies of our reports in front of you. I did want to talk a little bit about audits and what we do during an audit, just to kind of give you a little bit of background. We're here to do what's called a financial statement audit. And so you're required annually by state law to have an audit performed by independent auditors, and that was our job. And so what we did is take your financial information, and you need to record all the transactions. That's your job. And our job is to look at those transactions and make sure that the financial statements that are prepared using those numbers are fairly stated. And so we do a lot of looking at different documents. Your responsibility is to provide us with those documents. We look at cash balances, make sure that you're reconciling the balances properly. We test those balances. We confirm them with the banks where you do business. We look at revenues. We confirm many of the different revenues with the state and the county. We test expenditures, both payroll expenditures and non-payroll expenditures. Debt service, we make sure that the debt you're reporting is properly reported. We look at capital assets, test those balances. We look specifically at grants and make sure that you're reporting properly in accordance with the grant agreements and that you're following grant agreements. And we also look at different laws and regulations, make sure that you're following specific laws as required by the State Board of Education. And we also look at fund equities and make sure that those balances are accurately portrayed. We do not test every transaction. It's on a test basis, so that's part of the audit, is for us to design our audit so that we can accurately give an opinion on your financial statements. So I'll kind of go through some of the documents. I know there's a lot of reports there. Several of them are required by auditing standards to be provided to you. The first one I'll talk about is the annual financial report, and that's got a plastic foam along the edge. And if you open up, you see there's a table of contents there, and we've got 84 pages. And I am not going to talk about each and every page, but I will stop on pages 1 through 3. And 1 through 3 is where our independent auditor's report resides. And you'll see that page 1 is on our letterhead. And this is where we as a firm are telling you that we've audited your financial statements and that they're fairly presented on the cash basis of accounting. So you're using cash basis reporting as opposed to accrual basis, which is perfectly fine. It's allowable by the State Board of Education, and actually I prefer it for school districts since you've got a nice cutoff, June 30th, your school is done for the year, and you'll begin the next year, July 1st. So cash basis, perfectly fine. We're giving a good opinion on your cash basis records. I'll stop at a few other pages, but if you look at pages 4 through 12, that's called the Management's Discussion Analysis, and that was prepared by you. And those pages talk about the current year balances and also the 2015 balances, so there's some comparisons made between the 2 years. It's a nice place to go if you don't want to read the entire document. The next page I'm going to stop at, though, is page 13, and this is where you'll see what's called the Statement of Net Position. And this is a snapshot in time. This is where balances stood at June 30th, and none of these numbers really should be any news to anyone because you've already seen the treasurer's reports as of June 30th. And all the revenues and expenses have been reported to you all along during the year. So really the audit is a collection of all those bills you've approved, those showing expenses, and all the receipts and the treasurer's reports. Again, if anybody's lost, we're looking at the annual financial report, and I'm on page 13. It's called the Statement of Net Position, and you can see there's, at that point in time, cash and investments were $27.8 million. You had capital assets totaling about $252 million. Down below in the liability section, you see the tax anticipation warrants, $20 million, and then also your bonds payable of about $287 million, and your your net position down below of 21 million. So that's all your funds plus capital assets and long-term debt. Now, the capital assets and long-term debt don't reside in your education fund. Those are added in as adjustments to the financial statements to get them in compliance with the reporting standards. I'm going to flip the page and go to the page 17. And actually here you can see this is the revenues and expenditures for the year ended. And you can see the grand total of revenues was about 123 million. Grand total expenditures, I'm in the far right-hand column there. Grand total expenditures, 127 million. So you experienced a net deficit for the year of about a little over 3.9 million, with all your funds combined. You do see that the capital projects fund is presented, and this they began the year with 5,088,000. That was a result of the AUP, and so that fund is listed this year. I'm going to move forward a few pages now to where the notes to the financial statements begin. The notes go from page 21 to 51. These are various required disclosures about their accounting practices, cash balances, investments, debt, fund balances, capital assets. There's many pages in here about employee retirement systems, your IMRF plan, and the TRS as well. So about 30 pages of notes to the financial statements there. After the notes to the financial statements, you'll see there's some other information. There's some information in here regarding the Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund, Teachers Retirement System, and then beginning on page 59 is where you see the individual fund schedule. So 59 and 60 marks where you can see what happened in the education fund, the operation and maintenance fund, working cash, etc. You see on, if you look at page 61, I'm going to stop on page 61 for a second here. The ending fund balances of the education and the operation and maintenance funds are in deficits. So you see down at the very bottom there, deficit fund balance of the education was 3.6 million, and the operation and maintenance was about 4.8 million deficit. After that, there's several pages of budget to actual reporting. So it's the budget you approved, what actually occurred on a cash basis. There's a column for variances, and then also presented are the 2015 amounts. You can kind of see where you finished in relation to your budget and where those numbers, how those numbers compare with 2015. So all the different funds are listed here in these pages. You can go page by page, fund by fund, and do any sort of analysis that you see fit. I'm going to fast forward past the financial statements for a minute and stop at page 81. And we've already heard some discussion about the increase in the EAB, and you can see this page 80 and 81, 82 show the equalized assessed valuation for the last 10 years, the tax rates, the tax extensions, and also the tax collections. And you can see back in 2008, that was the high water mark, if you will, of the equalized assessed valuation. And then it had gone down every year since then up until 2015. There was an uptick of 50 million in the equalized assessed value. So for the first time since 2008, the district sees a change going upwards on the equalized assessed value. I'm going to flip the page, one more page here. On page 84, you see a schedule of operating expenditures per student. And so what this takes into account is all the expenditures. The amounts are adjusted for non-operating items. And you can see that the total operating expenditures per student was $13,329. So that's what you spent this most recent year to educate each student Your 2015, I went back and looked at 2015, it was 13,182, so it was a little bit higher this year. And if you look at the state average for high school districts for 2015, that average was 16,493. So you're about $3,000 below the state average when it comes to operating expenditure per student for high school districts. Some of the other reports, and I'll take questions at the end if you don't mind. Some of the other reports you have, one of them is called the single audit report, and in there, since you've spent more than $750,000 of federal dollars, you have what's called a single audit, and so we do extra testing on federal grants, and we also help you in preparing your schedule of expenditures or federal awards, and you see that appears on page 7, and you'll see that if you look at column F on page 7, all the way at the bottom there's a total, and that's the amount you spent of federal dollars during the year, $1,777,000, and all those different various programs. Part of the single audit involves reporting any findings that come up during the audit, and there's a couple findings reported this year. Those findings begin on page 10. So 10, 11, 12, and 13 are the various findings for the single audit this year. They were actually repeats from last year, and then there was one new one, the one on page 12, and then dealt with the having to make adjustments through the AUP is a finding. So those were the findings that were reported in the single audit report. We also issued, I'm going to jump to a new document now. There's 2 letters that you have. They're called, they're not in the plastic cones, they're just stapled. They're called communication with those charged with governance. So that's a communication from our audit firm to you. And they just talk really about what an audit is and who's responsible for different items. The one that's marked at the conclusion of the audit, that also includes adjustments that were made during the audit process. So if you take your amounts from your general ledger and you make our adjustments that were agreed to by management, we went through all the adjustments with you and explained why these adjustments were necessary. Those amounts equal the amounts that are in the financial statement. So it's really kind of an A plus B equals C sort of a deal. The last document we have for you is called a management letter. Again, another staple document. And while we're here to do a financial statement audit, if we run across any areas where we see there could be some improvements made within the office, reporting, etc., we point those out to you in the management letter. And I believe you get copies of that, and I can certainly take any questions about any of the matters that we talked about in that. I know there's a lot of documents and a lot of pages.
I believe at this point we'll get a motion on the table to approve the 2015-2016 audit report as presented. Have a motion, please.
So
Second,
Second.
discussion. Now we'll start the questions. Mr. Lucetti? Well, he was jumping to the microphone.
In the report, I saw something I hadn't run across before. I've seen restricted cash, unrestricted cash. There was something called unspendable. I don't know what that is. Can you kind of explain what gets classified under that?
Sure.
It was in the government funds.
Right, yes. Under the accounting standards as dictated by the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, your fund balances are required to be reported in one of 5 different categories. So unrestricted would be the least restricted, if you will. There's restricted, committed, assigned, and there's also non-spendable. And the non-spendable fund balance, in this case, relates to the building trades inventory that's classified inside the education fund. You've already spent that money, it's an asset, but you can't re-spend that again until you sell that land or develop it and sell it, and at that point it will become unrestricted there. So it's
That's
a
the
direct
way we're
offset.
holding the land in.
Yes.
On the, those last pages where we have the budget to actual, and I think I know the answer now. Those take into account all those journal entries that were included in the auditor communication,
Yes.
correct? So those are, that budget to actual is after those journal entries have been made.
That's correct.
And there was a lot of movement from various things to the capital projects, or not capital projects, I'm sorry, the debt services fund that were not included in the budget.
Yes, you're correct.
And then my last one on the financial report, the amount that's due from or due to, we have the big variances in the budget. I think it's.
On behalf.
Pardon?
Was it the?
Oh, yeah, on the on behalf, we'll have a big variance. I mean, first of all, I know that doesn't really impact the financials, because it isn't, but how is that reported to us? And, there was a big variance there.
Yeah, you're right. You're right about it doesn't affect the bottom line, if you will, because it's shown as both revenues and expenditures. And again, this is another governmental accounting standards board requirement to show those payments. And so this reflects what the state of Illinois is putting into the TRS system on behalf of your certified staff. And so the calculation used to be based on the payroll, and it was percentage of the payroll. Beginning last year, 2015, and now again in 2016, and going forward until the Governmental Accounting Standards Board changes things again, the calculation is done at the state level. And it's basically your share of the statewide liability that gets allocated to you. So you can't possibly calculate it exactly until the state tells you what it is. And that amount would be typically available in March. I believe it was how it came out this most recent year. And so when that report gets released by the state, then you'll know what it is. But the amount that you had budgeted for 2016 was well below what the expected level was.
Any other discussion?
I have a more general question, not necessarily specific to you, Dave, but now that we've got this information, make a dangerous assumption that we approve the audit tonight, what happens going forward with the findings? Where's the accountability created? Is it reported back, and how does that get digested kind of going forward?
And we've talked about that. I've talked with Chris and Dean, and I think the meeting with Dave and Kelly and Chris and myself.
Would you please,
I think the meeting was productive, and I think that we discussed this. It'd be a recommendation that as we move forward, Kelly and myself meet with two board members on a monthly basis, and the board report back on the progress that's being made. Nothing was new to us in the audit, but it's imperative that we follow through and the procedures are put in place and continue to be documented, and we show progress. So it would be my recommendation if we move forward with those monthly meetings, report back to the board.
So, yeah, I actually think it has to be an agenda item on every meeting going forward, that we create a master list of not only the findings, but all the improvements that are listed in the management letter. And we, there's already, management responses in here, but we monitor each one of those for progress, because we don't want to have these be repeated, you know.
So keep it as a running log as well.
Yeah,
Don't let it
and
drop off.
and I would hope that the board would also have this go to the finance committee, and they look at it, because there's, you know, individuals that have some knowledge on the audit. So I think it should go to the finance committee each month and back to the board until we have those resolved.
I agree. I think one important piece is to make sure that we're prioritizing that too, from the management letter, picking out the ones that are obviously the most important, working with administration to get realistic goals on when they can be completed or addressed, going through it. And as long as it's a running thing on the finance committee and on the regular board meeting, we'll at least be able to show progress on them going forward, and like Chris said, not have them reoccur.
I appreciate the tenor, because that's where I was going to go, was the idea that it should be recurring. But it also just has to be kept in mind that, with all due respect to current administration, this is our responsibility.
Yes.
So that for to see it once a year and then not have it come back up for another 12 months, that can't happen. So
Agreed.
Okay.
Agreed. And I would like to thank Mr. Lucetti and Mrs. Glatz for sitting down and meeting with Mr. Meyer and Kelly and Dr. Tingley in regards to the management letter. I know that was a long meeting, but it's very much appreciated. And going forward, for consistency, I would express that the two of you meet monthly as a team, and then report back to the finance committee, and then ultimately back to the board. Thank you for the very thorough review.
Hey, Greg, just have one more question, and I don't know if this is part of the whole scope. I know it's in your management letter, but were you comfortable with the scope and direction that was given for this particular audit? Like, was it broad enough? Do you feel that you were able to get into what you needed to get into? Would you have any recommendations for changing the scope of the audit the following year?
Oh, the scope of the audit is, if there were any limitations to it, we would report it on the limitations.
That's what I wanted to hear.
Thank you, Mr. Meyer. We have a motion, a second. Any further discussion? Need a roll call, please?
Mrs. Glatz,
Aye.
Mr. Kozel,
Aye.
Mr. Kirking,
Aye.
Mr. Costick,
Aye.
Mr. Lucetti,
Aye.
Mr. Lulo,
Aye.
Mrs. Molinari.
Aye. Resolution for the sale of property. Dr. Tingley.
Resolution for the sale of property. The district currently owns 3 parcels of land that at this time we would recommend to put up for sale. I'm going to do it in 3 separate motions. So the first, we will discuss 100 acres on West Manhattan Road. And just some of the highlights, the Board of Education finds and determines the property has become unnecessary and suitable and convenient for a school and unnecessary for the uses of the district. In light of the findings, it is in the best interest of the board that the property be sold at public sale. The board would authorize and direct myself to take any and all actions necessary to effectuate the sale of the property. For this particular parcel of 100 acres, I would recommend the minimum price be set at $1.5 million, or $1.2 million. It would be closed bid at 3 o'clock on February 15th. The board reserves the right to accept or reject any bids at that time. Some highlights: security deposit of 10% of the proposed sale submitted with the bid and earnest money. And once again, the board could reject any and all bids, whether or not they meet the minimum bid price, and to adjourn for sale. So it'd be my recommendation to put the 100 acres at West Manhattan Road for sale at $1.2 million.
Have a motion, please, for the resolution to approve the sale of the real estate property at 100 acres at 16460 at 16462 West Manhattan Road.
Second.
Roll call, please. Oh, I'm sorry, discussion. All right.
So first, do we have to formally have this resolution? Like, as it's written out here? So, you're just approving this resolution as written?
Yes,
Is that what it is?
yes. For the resolution as written.
Can you just, go a little bit over the process and how, is there gonna be any marketing done and how we're gonna go about that?
There will, legally, we must post, and it's attachment A in the document. And so the notice of sale will go in newspapers for 3 consecutive weeks. We will place signs, if approved, on those locations with my office number. We will then contact various commercial real estate individuals in the area to let them, to make sure they've seen the notice. I know they track these because the previous times we put land up, they call within 24, 48 hours of the first posting. But we'll make calls to the agricultural areas, for the Manhattan properties, and so that would be the main avenues. But certainly in the papers, 3 weeks in a row, signs, and then by word of mouth.
Further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Glatz.
Aye.
Mr. Kozel.
Aye.
Mr. Kirky.
Aye.
Mr. Costick.
Aye.
Mr. Lucetti.
Aye.
Mr. Lulo.
Aye.
Mrs. Molinari.
Aye. The second parcel.
Second parcel is 78.18 acres on West Smith Road in Manhattan Township. Now that is a not improved property. Minimum bid price would potentially be $700,000 as written, with the same parameters as the one before. The notice of sale, Exhibit A, would go in the papers 3 weeks in a row. The same terms of bid in terms of the date the bid is due, post-bid process.
Have a motion to approve the resolution for approving sale of real property at West Smith Road, Manhattan Township, 78.18 acres. Motion, please.
So
Take a second. Discussion.
Just one other question.
Yes.
If the minimum bid is not met, can the property then be marketed?
it can.
What's the
There would be a
process?
couple different processes. So at that point, we would come back to the board. We can start the process all over again. You have to go at a lower price. We could market it with a realtor. If you market it with a realtor, then you still have to get the original price. So if the board were to lower the minimum bid, we would have to start the process over again.
So a realtor can sell it there.
If they get the $700,000 correct, and then we would be less the cost of commission.
There wouldn't need to be a resolution if you have the realtor step in.
There may have to be a resolution, but we wouldn't have to start the whole process. Our attorneys would help us out with that. We've never gone that route.
Sure.
But if we were to get a bid lower than the price, the first thing we would do is begin discussions to see how close they are to that price before we would come back to the board to do any adjustment.
Further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Glatz.
Aye.
Mr. Kozel.
Aye.
Mr. Kirky.
Aye.
Mr. Costick.
Aye.
Mr. Lucetti.
Aye.
Mr. Lulo.
Aye.
Mrs. Molinari.
Aye. The third parcel.
Third parcel, 71.90 acres on west 191st Street in Tinley Park. Same bid parameters. Minimum bid price will be $4.5 million. This parcel has been for sale a number of times. It's been under contract a number of times. Nothing currently obviously in place, so it would be my recommendation to put this back on the market and just see where we go.
Motion for the resolution approving the sale of real property at 191st in Harlem, 71.9 acres. Motion, please. So moved. Second.
Second.
Discussion. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Glatz.
Aye.
Mr. Kozel.
Aye.
Mr. Kirky.
Aye.
Mr. Costick.
Aye.
Mr. Lucetti.
Aye.
Mr. Lulo.
Aye.
Mrs. Molinari.
Aye. Personnel report, Dr. Tingley, please.
Personnel report found at your places this evening. Under employment, Jean Bishop, full-time bus driver, transportation. She started on October 12th, 2016. Robert Jenkins, full-time bus driver, transportation, started on October 24th. Brittany Thomas, sign language interpreter, Central, started on November 7th. Melanie Nowicki, English teacher, Central High School, was recalled to fill a vacancy created by a teacher that is taking a year-long parental leave. Lindsay O'Farrell, reading teacher, East High School, was recalled to fill a vacancy created by a teacher that is taking a year-long parental leave. Jody Frigo, speech path, West High School, was recalled due to a growth in the number of students requiring speech services. Bridget Guevara, a psychologist, was recalled due to contractual obligations. And District 210 assuming the services of the psychologist at the McKay Center. In the past, we obviously paid the salary for the full-time psychologist there. That individual retired, so now we provide services to our 34 students at McKay with that individual, so we don't have to pay for that salary. Matt Sigourney, Special Services, PE, East High School, was recalled due to sections in Special Services and Physical Education. Michelle Freeland, music teacher, was rehired as a 2/5 music teacher. And Kimberly Barnes, permanent substitute at Central High School. I ask that you accept this employment as presented.
Motion to approve the employments.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
roll call, please.
Well,
Oh, I'm sorry, discussion.
All the recalled teachers, was that at the beginning?
They were at the beginning of the year. These should have been brought soon. We followed the recall, worked through the union, and they were not brought back to the board. But they started at the beginning of the year.
Further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Glatz.
Aye.
Mr. Kozel.
Aye.
Mr. Kirking.
Aye.
Mr. Costick.
Aye.
Mr. Luchetti.
Aye.
Mr. Lulo.
Aye.
Mrs. Molinari.
Aye.
For the resignations, Robert Cavallo has resigned from his position as bus driver for the transportation department. Jeff Deese has resigned from his position as head boys soccer coach in the West, effective October 2016. Christine Petrovsky, assistant softball coach, West High School, effective immediately. And Michael Younger, bus driver, transportation center, will resign effective November 28th. I ask that you accept these resignations as presented.
Motion to accept the resignations.
So moved.
Second. Second. All those, discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Aye.
For retirement, Karen Michaelcroft, transportation secretary, requesting to retire effective November 2nd, 2016. Dan Moore, district department chair for Ag IT, is requesting to retire under board option A at the conclusion of the 2020-21 school year. Robert Leamy, physical education teacher at West High School, is requesting to retire under board option A at the conclusion of the 2020-2021 school year. Tom Evans, security, East High School, is requesting to retire under IMRF retirement system effective February 1st, 2017. I ask that you accept these retirements as presented.
Motion to accept the retirements as presented. So moved. Second.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Glatz.
Aye.
Mr. Kozel.
Aye.
Mr. Kirking.
Aye.
Mr. Costick.
Aye.
Mr. Luchetti.
Aye.
Mr. Lulo.
Aye.
Mrs. Molinari.
Aye.
Under Reeves, Tiffany Anastasia, Central High School, English teacher, requesting a 12-week FMLA at the conclusion of her maternity leave. Returning at the beginning of the 17-18 school year, and Jessica Patterson, special services instructor at West High School, requesting a 2-week FMLA at the conclusion of her maternity leave. I ask that you accept these leaves as presented.
Motion to approve the leaves.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Discussion. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Glatz.
Aye.
Mr. Kozel.
Aye.
Mr. Kirking.
Aye.
Mr. Costick.
Aye.
Mr. Luchetti.
Aye.
Mr. Lulo.
Aye.
Mrs. Molinari.
Aye. Treasurer's
Okay,
report.
one more.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Other business. Dan Scanlon, maintenance employee, buildings and grounds, requesting to rescind his resignation. Dan is a skilled employee. He's our carpenter. He left us for a couple of weeks. He's asking that the board rescind his resignation. It would be my recommendation to do so.
Motion. Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Okay. A motion to rescind the resignation.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
Hasn't happened during my time.
Is there any special reemployment? Does he start from scratch?
Okay, may we have a roll call, please?
Mrs. Glatz?
Aye.
Mr. Kosel?
Aye.
Mr. Kirkling?
Aye.
Mr. Costick?
Aye.
Mr. Lucetti?
Aye.
Mr. Lulo?
Aye.
Mrs. Molinari?
Aye. Treasurer's report for October 2016. Make a motion to approve the treasurer's report.
Go ahead, Kelly.
We just can't discuss.
For the month ended October 31st, 2016, the district received revenues of $2,378,312 and expended $6,627,781. The total cash fund balance as of October 31st is $24,931,663, and total fund balance accounted for warrants and loans outstanding is $17,931,663. To date, our operating revenues are, we're experiencing about a 2% decrease from our operating revenues over the prior year. And this is mainly a result of us not getting our mandated categorical payments. We've not received any payments yet this year. So that just explains the decrease year over year with operating revenues. There's been some uptick in other areas, including our federal funds reimbursement. We've received $235,039 to date in Title I funding, whereas at the same time last year we had received $100,686 in Title I reimbursement money. As far as operating expenses, we're experiencing a 10.2% decline year over year in total. We're about 4 months. We are 4 months through the year, 33.3% through the year, and we've expended 31.7% of our budgeted operating dollars. So we're tracking pretty closely to where we should be right now. Our declines are happening pretty much in every single expense category. So we are about $2.4 million, regardless of the not receiving the mandated categoricals to date. We are still about $2.4 million better than we were at the same time last year. That's really all I have to report on that.
Okay, a motion to approve the treasurer's report for October 2016, please.
So moved.
Second. Discussion. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sleepy. Thank you, everybody. Will know. Discussion.
Do you have any forecast on when we're getting our categories, any hints from the state? They're notorious for categoricals. Just notorious. The last I saw that we should receive one payment by the end of the calendar year. About invoice. I believe our mandated categoricals are between 1.5 and 2 million. I don't know the exact number off the top of my head.
Anything further?
I know Kelly's going to look into some of these things, but I just want to keep on everyone's radar. Some of these smaller revenue items, like rentals, class and technology fees, they're all, showing significant decreases from what they were in fiscal year 2016. So, I think it's just important that we kind of know why that's occurring at this point in time. And then on the revenue side, or on the, expenditure side, just the big outliers, that special ed tuition. And I know in the finance committee, you mentioned it was, somewhat of a timing delay, but that would be helpful.
And I know we talked about it at the finance meeting, is it possible we could have that by next meeting, to like accounts receivable from the state, kind of see where, an aging report to see how far out they are and what we should be expecting.
Yes.
And just trying to keep on top of that.
Yes, I made that note, and I'll include the next one. And to answer your question, I can answer the other revenue line item. Majority of that is being driven by what gets grouped into there is athletic entry fees, athletic admissions, swim lessons. So the fact that we're not holding any events at North this year just accounts for most of that decrease year over year.
Further discussion?
How are we on our balance with the tax anticipation works?
We, in the part of my superintendent, we'll talk about it right now. We will be making another draw by the close of this month. And we anticipate that the $7 million we were planning, we were scheduled for 5, but with not receiving the categoricals, we will draw 7. So that will put us at 14 with 6 remaining. We have a meeting scheduled for December 13th, Kelly and I, with all second to discuss the progress we're making on the financials this year and to discuss where the low point will be trending the remainder of the year. Right now, as you see in our cash flows, we're anticipating needing somewhere around $4 million depending upon the timing of state aid. So we will be working the second week in December to secure funding for the remainder of the fiscal year.
Additional discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Glatz.
Aye.
Mr. Kozel.
Aye.
Mr. Kirky.
Aye.
Mr. Costick.
Aye.
Mr. Lucetti.
Aye.
Mr. Lulo.
Aye.
Mrs. Molinari.
Aye. Student activities report for October 2016. Presentation?
Is that me? Okay. Sorry. For the month of October 2016, the total student activity account balance is $2,446,672.82, with revenues of $948,531.32 and expenditures of $985,245.24. I noted this in the memo, but there is an adjustment to the beginning balance. The October 1st balance, the end of September, from the report that you received in September of $521.59. That was due to a check that was cut in October that posted as of September 30th. So it caused a change in our beginning balance. I've highlighted some of the negative, I shouldn't say some, I've highlighted all of the negative accounts. There were 4 of them at the end of October. The one for the Illinois Philharmonic Orchestra, we actually identified today, and there was a check cut out of that account that was coded incorrectly, and so that'll be, you'll see that corrected in the November report. The remaining negative balances have also been explained in the memo. I don't know if you want me to go over those. And then just to highlight as well, all of the north balances were moved during the month of October to their corresponding accounts at East. And I did work with the athletic boosters and the music boosters to determine how they would like that money to be moved. We came to agreement on that with each of those organizations, and the adjustments reflect that.
Thank you. Motion to approve the student activities report for October 2016.
Move.
Second.
Second.
Discussion?
Are we still moving towards a consolidation and these accounts and making sure that no district activity is going through them?
Yes.
Can you tell me there's a pretty decent balance for the SWSC principal/treasurer?
That's the entire conference.
It's the entire conference,
Yes.
but it's split into West.
Monica's the treasurer.
Okay. That's what I thought. It was good. All right.
Further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Glatz.
Aye.
Mr. Kozel.
Aye.
Mr. Kirky.
Aye.
Mr. Costick.
Aye.
Mr. Lucetti.
Aye.
Mr. Lulo.
Aye.
Mrs. Molinari.
Aye. Workman's compensation insurance renewal Dr. Tingley.
Instead of memo with the workers' comp, Mr. Barker is here with us this evening. Thank you for your patience, Tim. He can answer any questions that you may have. As you can see in the last page of the document that was sent, our number of claims has significantly decreased. 2011, 39, 12, 27, 13, 40. Then we go to 14, 27, and 15, 19, and 16, 11. 3 years that they take the average, so we anticipate quite a savings next year, somewhere in the neighborhood of $80,000. Tim can answer any specific questions you may have, but if you have a recommendation to stay with IMRF and to Gus and Clapter for another year.
I have a motion to approve the workers' compensation insurance renewal as presented, please.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
discussion, questions?
What would, I don't know if you can answer, Dr. Toyer can, what can we attribute to having lesser claims? Or have we instituted something new that,
Well,
some new policies and procedures?
that's a good question.
One of
them is the mild winter last year. Mild winter, no question. The other thing is, I think Rich has done an outstanding job of training these individuals who also see more mats through the building, which eliminates some of the slip and falls, but certainly a mild winter is a contributor.
I was just going to ask about the providers in this area. It looks like we had 2 here. I mean, are there, and I'm looking through this now, so there's no other providers unless you go to a consortium?
Right now, the Illinois Public Risk Fund we're with right now is the most competitive workers' compensation market in the state of Illinois for schools. There's about 4 different companies, and about 2 are in financial difficulties. They're in approval right now.
Is there any financial rating or anything on the fund we're in now?
AAA best rating.
Any further questions, discussion?
Thank you.
Roll call, please.
Mrs. Glatz. Aye. Mr. Kungsel.
Aye.
Mr. Kirkland.
Aye.
Mr. Costick.
Aye.
Mr. Luchetti.
Aye.
Mr. Lulu.
Aye.
Mrs. Molinari.
Aye. Informational items. Mr. Lulu, you have a report for us for the October 25th, 2016 Special Ed 843 Governance Meeting.
I do. I attended that meeting. It was pretty routine. All programs are on task. We're staying within our budget currently at 843. Everything's on task. Do well by the end of the year. And the event is 2017. That concludes my report.
Thank you. FOIA requests.
In our FOIAs from October 12th to November 10th, we received 59 FOIAs. So it continue to roll in. Brian Murphy is doing an outstanding job as we continue to work our way through these.
Thank you. Is there, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Absolutely.
Any need to discuss the possibility of a person to do that? Really?
It's a very good question. In terms of the nature of the requests, many of them are able to be found through access to technology. Their emails, their records. So at this time, I think it'd be counterproductive. We're also being challenged now with a number of FOIAs for the foundation. And so going back and going through past years' records of foundation to try and gather that information. So that's been the last couple of days. We'll just continue to roll it.
Do you think that once we get these board docs, after the first of the year, we get board docs online and have a lot of this?
It won't impact this.
Legislative report.
Legislative report. One bill. I don't know if it'll help us or not, but there's a substitute teacher shortage regionally, and certainly in the state of Illinois. Education. This was just passed. Educator licensure
includes out-of-state reciprocity for substitute teaching license. We'll see if this helps, but it passed both houses. As Amy had talked a little bit about the ESSA, Tony Smith started and talked about the law last week. There will be changes, certainly, but it's going to take a monumental effort to change any of the education department. It's highly unlikely. Illinois will continue to work with the ESSA as our guide. And then also out of Springfield, 2 meetings were held. Amongst the leader meetings, there was no movement on the budget. The stopgap ends on December 31st. Education is the only agency that has a real budget through June 30th, 2017. And according to SCOPE, our legislative group, the governor has shifted his priorities a bit and now says he wants redistricting, that would be the voting areas, and a property tax freeze before he will recommend any new revenue. And the focus on that meeting was a report from the Governor's Office of Management and Budget, a 5-year projection for the state. Dismal numbers all remain the same. The amount of unpaid bills could reach as high as $47.1 billion. So that's the latest out of Springfield this week.
Thank you. District 210 Advisory Committee report.
Good evening. The District 210 Advisory Committee has met twice on October 4th and then this week, recently this past Monday. We have seated new members, determined meeting dates, and we've also begun the research and discussions on our topics of study, advertising, and the review of our dress code policy. Our next meeting is December 12th.
Thank you, Dr. Mulholland. Building and Grounds report, Mr. Wilson.
Hello again. You all should have received the operation and maintenance report earlier this week. I'll just take a couple moments to go over a few of the highlights from, you've all seen it. If there's too much information, let me know. Basically what this report does is compares expenditures for custodial services, lawn care supplies, purchase services from this year to the same period last year. We do have several of the utility bills in the report that are estimates, and they're highlighted in red, or the text is in red. But we feel that we believe that there's enough information to accurately estimate the reduction in expenditures through October of around $500,000. Most of that comes from electricity. 190,000 of that's from electricity, 124,000 from north, 22,000 from central, 36 at east, and about 8,600 from west. We expected a little bit more out of west. Actually, since we've been running the generators, the natural gas costs at west have gone up more than the natural gas gone down. But just by comparing those two numbers, we can't identify if that's due to running the generators. We have engineers from Midwest Energy for helping us work through this coaching process, and they're looking at some numbers. And they'll get back to us hopefully soon so that we can make some decisions on that generator. Also, we have to consider some of the maintenance costs, which we haven't looked at yet. Natural gas costs district-wide are up $35,000 through running the generators. Water and sewer service at Central, East, and West costs are up. We expected they would be up slightly with increased enrollment. Waste removal costs are down district-wide due to the competitive bidding process. Cleaning service costs are higher at Central, East, and West due to the fact that we added an additional custodian at each building and had to spread some of the overhead for management over those three buildings when we close north. But overall, the cleaning costs for the district are down $75,634. Lawn care costs are up $12,000 district-wide. We believe the reason is, well, we know the reason is we're on a per occurrence invoicing system now, where in the past we had monthly payment. We will not get a bill in December, January, February, or March. And we believe by the end of the fiscal year, there will be savings in that area. So the planning services costs are lower at Central and East by quite a bit. We don't expect that to continue to be a trend. Part of the reason for that is that we had some competitive bidding, but at the same time, over this past summer, we didn't do any renovations in our buildings, where typically we will maybe replace the carpet, remodel the department office. We expanded the transition program the previous year. So cutting all those projects out is part of the reason for the drop in supplies and services. Overall, for the first third of the year, we seem to be making appropriate progress toward our original estimate of $650,000 in savings for closing the north. An additional $200,000 in savings for competitive bidding process, running the cogens, and like we talked about, no renovations.
Any questions for Mr. Mulkey?
Rich, with human government, we still have some of the park districts cutting some of the grants.
Just Record Square Park District contracts with Brigham and for a long time.
I know you're working on West, but at Central and East, do you have enough data now to judge the cogen and like where it makes sense up to like a certain gas price or?
We have preliminary report back from the engineers from Lincoln East, and it seems that it's going to make sense to run the generator. We're waiting on Central and the Northwest. Those things expect a little bit more.
Community Relations Report. Oh, Dr. Berry, thank you.
Evening. Magical dinners at each school begin at the start of December. Tickets can be purchased at lwcmusic.org, lwemusic.org, and lwwmusic.org. The Lincoln Way Transition Program is hosting a poinsettia sale beginning November 28th. Each plant's $10 was grown from the seed in our greenhouses by our transition students. Order forms for these can be found under the news section of our website. The Lincoln Way East Athletic Boosters will be hosting a breakfast with Santa on December 3rd in the cafeteria. They will have a silent auction, face painting, photos with Santa, and toys for Tots Drive. And 14 students from Central and 4 students from West won awards for their entries in the VFW's Voice for Democracy contest. Thousands of entries were submitted, so we are very proud of these students.
Great, thank you very much. Asset of the month, Dr. Tingley.
Asset of the month is parent involvement at home. Thank your children's teachers for the good work they do in school. Learn the names of as many students as you can. Conduct a school-wide survey to learn students' opinions about the school climate. We're in the process of doing that right now. In the community, support your local schools.
Thank you. Superintendent's report, please.
Superintendent's report, I will refer you to the Lincoln Way sheet at your table. You can bring that home and certainly read that on your own. Under some other business, in reading through the audit findings, I had some discussions with some of our administrators. The material finding from years ago, but certainly we need to start to put processes and procedures in place to limit fraud risk. That's one of the opportunities for improvement. So what we're looking into, and I'll bring back to the board, is most states, including Illinois, have an office of an inspector general. The purpose is to protect the public integrity of various departments. Most major cities, and Chicago, provide this office as a safeguard to protect taxpayer dollars, make sure that public funds are being used effectively. Public employees and service providers are always acting in the best interest of the district and community. The powers and duties of an inspector general are set forth in Illinois state law. They have the authority to conduct investigations into allegations of incidents of waste, fraud, financial mismanagement of public education. The Inspector General will report on and make recommendations regarding investigations directly to the Board of Education. So my thought would be, I have to do some more research. Chicago Public Schools has this in place. A number of large urban schools have this in place. It would be a nonpartisan, third-party line where employees that would suspect or believe they witnessed any type of fraud, inappropriate activity, could call that non-school district party, be it an attorney from a different firm other than the board's attorney, then they would be able to conduct an investigation, bring those findings back to the board. It takes back that thought of, very similar to whistleblower policy, however, there's no fear of retribution from an employer. So it's something we're going to work on, develop. I'm going to bring it back to the board, but it could certainly help with, I believe, some of the findings of lack of fraud prevention or detection, and it could at least be a first step moving forward. Any thoughts? I haven't shared it with you yet, but it's something we're just now beginning to look into.
Any thoughts?
Great idea.
Sense, and I think it's
That's pretty obvious.
go forward and report back to us once you
I will.
have some information.
That concludes my report.
Okay. Any correspondence that needs to be shared before? None? Okay. We're going to go into closed session for the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of employees, collective negotiating, and litigation. Could I have a motion, please, to go into closed session for those three items?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mrs. Glatz?
Aye.
Mr. Kozel?
Aye.
Mr. Kirkland?
Aye.
Mr. Costick?
Aye.
Mr. Lucetti?
Aye.
Mr. Lulo?
Aye.
Mrs. Molinari?
Before we go, I wanted to thank the board members. We do have poinsettias from our students as a gift for your dedication and your time in this board and the appreciation week. So when we come back to the state one.
Thank you very much. To open session. Excuse me. No problem. We're back from closed session. We are in open session. We have no further business to conduct. May I have a motion to adjourn this meeting? Oh, roll call. I'm sorry.
Mrs. Glatz?
Aye.
Here, I'm sorry. Mr. Kozel?
Here.
Mr. Kirkland?
Here.
Mr. Costick? Mr. Lucetti? Mr. Lulo?
Here.
Mrs. Molinari?
Here. Motion to adjourn. Somebody? Second?
Second.
All those in favor? Meeting is adjourned. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving.